while you're still standing, okay, I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna make a statement, I'm gonna make this statement. It's a pretty good feeling in this room right now. How many would strongly agree with that statement? Raise your hand. Okay. How many, if you don't strongly agree, would agree? All hands for those questions. If you strongly agree or if you just agree, raise your hand. Now look around. See how many hands are up? Okay, you can all sit down. Now think about this. You know, when he came in, how many are from Boise here? How many from Helena, Montana diocese? Anybody from Yakima? Okay, what other diocese do we have represented? Seattle. Seattle, of course, Seattle. I think Portland, we have Portland here. Okay. Anchorage, of course. Right. Long Island. Oakland. Charleston. Great. We're from all over the place, and I forced you to share with somebody you probably didn't know before you came in here. I was trying to figure out how am I going to do this if we're rolling robes. I figured out the plan. Now, there really is a pretty good feeling in the room right now. The volume level, I thought, oh my God, I'll never get quiet. now, you're probably, as individual people, you were thinking, gee, this is cool. This is a nice thing happening here. But because we did the hand raising thing, you now know how most of the rest of the group feels about that, which confirms and affirms your experience. Okay? And that's why people join, stay, and serve in their parish. Because in your parish, they feel like there's a pretty good feeling. Now, what we're going to talk about today is how you can measure and manage that to make it happen even more, and to make it happen for everyone. So let's see where okay, I have a video for you. Some of you, especially the Seattle folks, have seen this. But I see something new in it every time I watch this. Oh, can we do the lights thing, Scott? Where's Scott? Oh, he was kidnapped right there. Oh. Just the front ones. I'm just trying to load the front ones. Well, that's good enough for now. Oh, that'll drive the camera guy crazy or something.
Don't worry about it.
A mobile phone salesman from South Wales.
One day, I tell my friends, my dream is to spend my life doing what I feel that I was born to do.
Paul, what are you here for today, Paul?
To sing opera. I've always wanted to sing as a career. Confidence has always been sort of like a difficult thing for me. I've always found it a little bit difficult being completely confident in myself.
Okay. Ready when you are.
telephone warehouse. And you did that. I wasn't expecting that. This was a complete breath of fresh air. I thought you were absolutely fantastic. You have an incredible voice. I think if you keep singing like that, you are going to be one of the favourites to win this whole competition.
I think that we've got a case of a little lump of coal here that is going to turn into a diamond.
Okay. Moment of truth, young man. Yes. Absolutely yes. Amanda?
Yes.
Paul? You are through to the next round.
Congratulations. You must be over the moon. I am. Big shocked. And as Paul heads home happy, the judges think they might have found something special in Cardiff.
I like shows where somebody isn't a professional, has a talent, isn't aware of it, has a normal job, and then you see something else. I like that. And that's what they
We'll
like.
discover little journey.
Yeah.
And from the return to the prince.
Ooh. Can you douse the front lights? Just do one switch at a time. All in there. Okay, well, we can live with that. Yep. Let's think about that clip from Britain Has Talent in terms of the parable of the sower. So Paul Potts, who did win the competition that year, by the way, Paul Potts is the seed of God's talent that's been planted in him, as is every parishioner and every one of us. And so we're in this part of the diagram here, the manifold people who exist because of God's gift. The soil from the parable of the sower is, well, the cheering audience or your parish community supporting each individual member of their town. Picture Pol Pot singing to an audience sitting on their hands saying, "Oh, opera, I can't stand up." He wouldn't have sung as well, would he? So in our parishes, when those things happen, when individuals are celebrated for putting their gift to work, it's a whole different, it's a nice feeling in this room. That's just like the parable of the sower, it's the good soil. And the judges are the sower, in a sense. They're organizing this whole event, and they're encouraging Paul, they're encouraging the audience. I'm sorry we didn't have like a better speaker thing, I just brought my little speakers with me, but in the very beginning, Pol Pot says, I'm here to do what I think I was born to do. He's talking about his vocation, Bishop Morneau, okay, vocation. And then he says, I've always had a trouble with confidence. Confidence means with faith, confides in Latin. Now, do you think he had more confidence after this event? Wow. So what does it look like to share faith and to grow faith? That little video clip, that's what that's about. When people have more confidence, they have more faith. Literally what it means. So, in the parable of the sower, Jesus says the good crop comes from the good soil, which has to do with the cheering audience or the cheering parish, each individual. What are you? This is not a sharing question, this is a thinking question. What are you the Pol Pots of in your life? How's that for a question? What are you the Pol Pots of in your life? Presenting this to people who've never heard about it before, I'm the Pol Pots of that. But we all have to know what that is. And that's actually the next presentation that Stephanie Moore's going to make is specifically about finding out about the seed of talent. Doing the Gallup research for that. Okay. At the turn of the millennium, Pope John Paul II wrote a wonderful encyclical on the turn of the millennium, and in it there's a section at the back called the spirituality of communion. And in that section, he said, brothers
and sisters in the faith should so regard each other. Okay, now this is how we should be looking at each other, says the book, as those who are part of me. The audience cheering for Paul Potts is saying, there I go. They probably weren't thinking about that, but to cheer him on is to cheer themselves and each other on. Those who are part of me. And in our parishes, when people come, join, stay, and serve, it's because they feel like the others are looking at them as part of themselves, and vice versa. And of course, that doesn't always happen, but that's the goal we want to get to. You know that there's been a lot of research lately about church attendance and the decline of the churches. This is a sort of summary that appeared in the New York Times from the Pew Forum for Religion and American Life. And basically, here's the Catholic. It looks like the Catholic is not declining the way the Protestants are, but in fact, 23.9%, which is almost a quarter of people currently living who are baptized as Catholics, are no longer practicing the faith. And a good chunk of those have gone to the unaffiliated, the crowd that is claiming no association with religion whatsoever. Now, the reason why our graph didn't go down over here is because of the influx of Hispanics into America, and they're all culturally Catholic, and many devoutly Catholic. So the point is, we've lost a quarter of the members. There's a problem here, and Pew says it's a problem of affiliation. That's the word they use. The Gallup folks in their research on churches use the word engagement, but it all means the same thing. Now, think about the difference between sitting here in this room waiting for this thing to start and how it was impossible to get you all to shut up to get back to the program, right? We took one huge jolt of engagement, didn't we? Because now there's a person sitting behind you or in front of you about whom you know all kinds of interesting stuff that you didn't know before. And, you know, if we had really, gone for usual half an hour on something like that, you'd leave here feeling closer to these complete strangers than your family in certain cases. Okay. So we're getting a little taste of engagement, and now we're going to look into some research around, what makes all of this work. Well, my clicker here has decided not to work. Here we go. When the Pew stuff came out, an editorial appeared in American Magazine called Lost Sheep. What's to be done about this situation? Now, everybody's asking that question, and here's some quotes from the editorial. It is difficult, if not impossible, to find consensus on the proper steps. You know that that's true. You get 12 Catholics together, you have 13 opinions. And we are all speaking ex cathedra when we render our prescription for what has to happen in the church. Okay. They said, we need to rethink methods of catechesis and adult formation. I don't know about you, but that's been happening for my entire life. And we don't seem to be making any headway there. We need to focus on outreach and concern for those who have walked away. We don't care. But we're trying to figure out how to communicate that care. So, if we recall the parable of the sower, all of these things, good as they are planting harvesting methods. They happen above the surface. We need to look down into the soil, to measure the soil, and to amend the soil. We need to work below the surface of church life to get to where we need to be. So here's where I'm from. Long Island, for those of you who are not from the East, is a 100-mile long fish nibbling at New York Harbor. That's what I'm there. That's where Father Monsignor Joe is from and where he worked. I actually was born in the Bronx, so I'm over here. We moved out to Jones Beach because we used to go there so often. My father said, let's move out there. It'll be easier than traveling there every weekend. And this is where I'm stationed right now at Port Jefferson Station. I'm at the base of the dorsal fin. My brother's a priest in our diocese too, and he's out here in East Hampton, the famous Hamptons. If you ever watch Royal Pains, it's filmed in his parish. And I like that. Okay, so a quick little bookends on this. A couple comes up to me one day, and they say, oh, Father, we were with Christ the King at Conduct for a meeting the other day. It's about 10 miles away from us. And a couple came up to us at the social, and they said, where are you two from? And we said, oh, we're from St. Gerard Magella. And they said to us, St. Gerard's? Oh, that parish. And they said to me, the reason why this is funny is because we were there 20 years ago for a meeting. Same parish, and at the break, somebody came up to us and said, where are you from? And we said, St. Gerard's, and they said, St. Gerard's? Oh, that parish. The exact same words. The two of them were hysterical when they told the story. So I'm really here to reflect with you, some of the tools and things we learned from other people on how this change took place. So to give you a little context here, when I went in 1990 to St. Gerard's with another pastor, we applied to be co-pastors. And we got there and we were greeted by a member of the parish council who said to us, oh, fathers, we've gone under twice already. If we go down a third time, we'll never make it. Welcome to St. Gerard's. So Chris and I said, is it too late to call the personnel office and take one of those other parishes? So what were we greeted with? This was our little kind of mythology that we created about what we experienced. This is what the parish looked like when we got there. Bankrupt for 12 years that we could figure out from the poor records that were left for us. You know, most of the people were fighting with each other, and there was no, it's horrific. We ended up, our debt to the diocese, we ran up to $600,000 at one point. There was a political action committee, actually ran the parish. They were the political action committee of the local congressman, and they used the parish as kind of a base to get him reelected. So they weren't interested in religious stuff. They canceled Holy Thursday. They didn't think it was relevant. And one of them was, seriously, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, we call him the Pulitzer Prize-winning mudslinger, from Newsday, who got 150 signatures together to get rid of me and Chris. And of course, what was the diocesan standard bureaucratic response? Give them whatever they want to shut them up. So it was like peace at all costs. That wasn't really helping at all. So the conventional wisdom solutions we were getting is, we didn't know what to do. Oh, have cake sales. The Vicar General just said that to us. Well, have cake sales and dances, raise more money. And we looked at each other, we got out in the car, and we said, well, we're not going to get any help from him, are we? Okay. Well, St. Gerard's used to be, we were built out of two farms. And from where we are out east, there's a lot of agriculture going on. In fact, Suffolk County is the highest grossing income county in New York State for agricultural activity. But it used to be potatoes, not that we could ever compare with your potatoes. The Long Island potato was a big thing, but most of your farms are the size of Long Island, so we couldn't. But now it's sod. We have more grass than Carter has, little liver pills, and ornamentals, and flowers, and wineries, 40 wineries. So it has a very high output. And we have lots of these small family farm things, and we've got farm stands. There must be 100 farm stands. There's a farm stand every 100 feet. So Chris and I imagined that we were really managing a farm that was a wreck, and the owner of the land came to get his share of the corn 2 months after we arrived. And we said, you want corn from this farm? Look at this farm. Are you kidding? Are you out of your mind? So I went down talking to Teddy Gladys one day. Teddy's now in heaven. But he was still alive when I got there. He and his brother, Max, also died the same year in their 80s. Their father, with the whole area where we are, was their farm. So I used to love to go down and talk to Teddy in his shed. He had this huge shed thing. He was also a machinist for the county. And I said, he said to me one day, you know, Father, they got this equipment store down on the highway. They're always calling me, Eddie, can you come down and fix this engine? Honestly, Father, Teddy says to me, honestly, I don't think they know anything about engines. They can change the oil and the plugs and nothing. Now he points to his farm over there. Look at my farm wall over there. The Franistan pin broke last weekend. They don't make parts for that anymore, Father. I didn't make my own part. And I'm thinking to myself, Father doesn't know how the parish works. here I am with a bankrupt parish, and I don't know how it works and how to fix it. If you had sent me to one of the parishes that was just rolling along, you know, the money coming in and everybody was, I would have been fine. But they sent us to this place that was broken down, and we didn't have a clue on how to turn it around. So what did we do? Well, we learned about stewardship and sacrificial giving from the then National Catholic to actually the Brooklyn Diocese. Monsignor Bracken had us put us onto some things. We invited Barbara and Doug Schultz, who were a couple who had spoken about sacrificial giving in 800 parishes around the United States. And the reason why they got to go around the United States was their archbishop at the time forbade them to do it in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati anymore, because the rich people were complaining. So they started going around the country. Thanks be to God, we got them to our parish. Income went up 32% when the gratitude to God basis for giving was introduced to the parish. And the following year, our diocese stole Jerry Losi from the Archdiocese of Seattle. He came in with a phenomenal program, and we had a 22% increase on top of that. But Jerry told us way back in 96, actually, he said, if you can't latch onto the talent piece, the money isn't going to keep up. And he said, by the way, he said, the money is the easy part. I said, the easy part? Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Okay. Well, then we also ran across the research that Gallup did in a faith practice division they created, organizational studies on what glues people together in churches. Why do they join, stay, and serve? And their stuff was all about what's going on under the surface, what's going on underground in the relationships of the people. You know the parable of the sower? The seeds are fine, they're from God. The talent is great. But some of the soil is shallow, some of it's rocky, some of it's full of weeds. You know in your parish, there are some people who'll be there no matter what happens, and there are some people who will definitely not be there if they don't get their way. So you got different quality soil in the relationship level and commitment level of the parishioners. Well, they set out to measure that. And we got involved in that and found out that they had research around identifying the seeds of talent, measuring the soil of human relationships in the parish, and teaching the leaders how to farm, so to speak, how to use their tools and to manage the parish in a more appropriate way, a more fruitful way. Well, now this is a better picture of what's going on in the parish. I'm going to give you a little, jump right to the end and tell you some of the good stuff that happened. Last year we had 38 new catechists volunteer in 1 year. Can you imagine? This is a good soil result. We were able to, because of sacrificial giving over the years, put enough money away that when the farm, house, and acre, and barn that we were bought from originally came up for sale for the second time, we paid $600 grand cash for the thing. Same amount we owed the diocese when we didn't know what we were doing. We made it our thrift shop, barn and clothing and furniture. Last year we cleared, after New York State sales tax, $80,000 to supplement our income. Thanking on Trophy Day at St. George Baseball and also on opening day, the only 2 times I've ever out on the field, people I don't even know come up to me and thank me profusely that their kid is part of such a wonderful operation, that they meet other nice kids, they meet other nice families, they become friends. We now have a thing where that without anybody asking them to, all the parents are now sitting on the same side of our fields. We have 3 ball fields. And they're rooting for their kids together, regardless of what team they're on. That is a miracle! And serving, well, when we opened up the thrift shop, put out the word, we got 30 new volunteers overnight. The thing is open 6 days a week from 9 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon. And it's all operation totally run by volunteers. Now, when Father Chris and I started in 1990, we decided, let's take our mission, our parish mission, from the New Testament, because we can't make a mistake that way. So with our leadership, we did some planning together, and we chose Acts 2:42-43, figuring that would be a great goal to have. And you know how it goes, that they were faithful to the apostles' teaching, the common life, the breaking of bread and prayers, and they shared all that they had in common. So we would summarize it as evangelization, community, liturgy, and service. And the ladies on the staff said, you guys and your theological words, nobody knows what that stuff means. We need pictures. So they came up with the idea of picturing this. So, this is what we do. We're about spreading the seeds of God's good news. We're about taking care of those seeds as they grow in people, supporting each other in community. We're about picking the flower that grows from the seed that God planted in us and sharing that. And you know how it is when the flower fades, the seed, the seed bud, the fruit, grows under the flower. And what's inside the fruit with more seeds, and the process goes on and on. You can see the 4 parts of the bishop's pastoral from Bishop Morneau there: to receive gratefully, to nurture responsibly, to share sacrificially, and what's the last one? Was it
Return.
To return abundantly. You know that the fruit has more seeds in it than you could ever grow apple trees or whatever. So, at a certain point, we got this invitation from Gallup to go down to their workshop, their first presentation on growing an engaged church, which is what the book here is about. And they said, you know, they're not a religious organization, so everything they learn about what's going on in churches is just based on research, asking people what's going on. So they could talk to, let's say, 10, 15,000 people who are churchgoers and know what everyone who goes to church in the United States is thinking, because they're survey scientists. The head of the Gallup poll was interviewed during one of the presidential elections some years ago, and the guy interviewing him said, "How can you do that? How can you talk to people?" So Dr. Newport said, "Well, our founder, Dr. Gallup, used to say, when you go to the doctor to test your cholesterol, he doesn't take out all your blood, just a small sample." So the survey scientists know, they have ways of knowing that the small sample is accurate to everybody. So through that process, they found out that there are 4 things going on in fruitful churches of all denominations across the United States. And what are those 4 things? Inviting, giving, thanking, and serving. Exactly what's in Acts of the Apostles 2:42-44. So, like, Chris and I were at opposite ends of this huge room down in Washington, 120 pastors there. We both stood up at exactly the same moment. Gave the old high slide to each other. Oh Lord, we're actually on the right track here, right? So I went up to Mr. Gallup at the break, and I said, somewhat naively, "Mr. Gallup, do you realize that your 4 empirically derived outcomes are the same as Acts 2:42-44? And he starts to laugh. He says, "Isn't it great?" he said. "It's all in the Bible." And I began to sign on at that moment to this whole thing, because I realized they didn't think they were inventing something new, but they were forging an empirical path to stuff that we already know theologically and scripturally, but we don't know empirically because we're not in a position to measure it. Okay, those who are part of me is what Pope John Paul II said. So here's what their research indicates in terms of churches. If affiliation or engagement is the problem, and we need to make that deeper, spread that, their research indicated that belonging leads to believing more than 3.5 times to 1. It's the sense of belonging. There's a good feeling in this room right now. That's what inclines people's personal, individual, deep connection to God to grow. I was doing this in the Diocese of Camden, and this woman said, wait a minute. I was away from the church for 8 years, and they invited me back to join a prayer group. Are you telling me that if they had invited me back to cook my world-famous chocolate chip cookies, I would have had just as much of an opportunity to deepen my spiritual commitment to the church and to Christ? I said, absolutely. Oh my God, she said, she held her head to it. I'm having the worst headache of my life. Yes, belonging leads to believing, which is Catholic ecclesiology. Protestant theology is that believing leads to belonging, that individual believers constitute the church. We don't believe that. We believe that the church is a gift from God, and it was membership in the 12, the very first church, that gave everybody else. Now, here's the problem. Their churches are twice as engaged as ours are. So we have the right theory and the wrong practice.
They have the right practice and the wrong theory. Wouldn't it be great if we got together over this? Okay, so here's the bishop's pastoral on stewardship. And if you noticed, Father Dan will say this, Father Dan will say this later, that many people think the word stewardship is spelled with a $sign. That's because you can count the money, but it's hard to measure and count the talent and the time. The way to take that $sign away is to do stewardship by the numbers and have tools to measure and manage across the board. Now, we do, and the stewardship pastoral says that we return to God with increase. That requires measuring. Even Jesus measured in the parable. 30, 60, 100-fold. We measure in church. We measure registration. That's who signs up. We measure attendance. That's who shows up. We measure collections. That's who coughs up. The Gallup research has allowed us to measure engagement. That's who steps up. Who's stepping up to the plate here? Okay. Now, here's what their research indicates. 29%, this is across all denominations, 29% of those who show up are engaged. That means they're putting the bricks up to build something for everybody. They're the folks who are there, whether they like the pastor or not, they do what has to be done, et cetera, et cetera. 54% are goofing off on the job. They're not negative. It's a great thing, they're not negative. But if something interesting is happening at the mall, they're just as likely to go there as to go. They're our target audience, you might say, because they're the most likely to become engaged. 17% of those who show up in the average church in the United States are actively disengaged. That means that they're stealing the bricks from the parish, taking them home to build a barbecue in the backyard. And they're complaining about the poor quality of the bricks they've stolen from the church. They're likely to write to the bishop to complain about the lousy bricks that they stole. You know it. So, why does the research indicate that member engagement, hey, there's a good feeling in this parish, leads to spiritual commitment, and that leads to the spiritual health indicated in Acts and from Gallup's empirical research that people invite, give, thank, and serve. Engagement influences commitment, and it's more actionable. You can create programs around engagement much more easily than around spiritual commitment. So, outcomes of engaged members. Engaged members are 8 times as likely to invite others to your parish. Wow. And on average in the United States, that means they invite 6 people a year to something happening in your parish. 6 people who've ever been. Engaged members are giving up to 3 times as much money. That's on average 5% of income. They're twice as likely to be satisfied with their lives, and they're volunteering twice as many hours as others. And that is 2.5 hours a week, either in your parish or in the community, on average throughout the United States. So, let's look at the classic time, talent, and treasure, and let's look at them from above the surface of the soil and below the surface of the soil. So we're going to talk about measuring outcomes, what's being produced that's readily visible. I'm going to talk about measuring causes of outcomes, what's going on in the soil that is enabling us to find the good soil and get the good crop, as our Lord says, 30, 60, 100-fold. I'm going to give you an example from my parish, because it's the one I know best. Let's look at treasure. Let's look at percentage of increase in regular income this year, okay? Diocese had about 1%, my deanery 2%, we had a 20% increase in income this year. Sustained since last fall. Let's look at treasure, at time and talent. Let's look at what percentage of regular income do we spend on salary and benefits? Now, in our diocese, most parishes are spending 80 to 90% of the regular income on salary and benefits. Some are spending 105%, 110%, meaning they're spending their savings. The diocesan guideline is 75%. They tell me in business it should be 40%. We were only spending 32% of our regular income on salary and benefits. Why? Time and talent. Now, we've been doing this for 16 years. But the point is, there are so many people, professionals,
gifted people doing so many things in the parish, we don't have to pay for a lot of stuff. And we can lower it to that. We have 2 full-time volunteers on our staff. Retired people who said, oh, I want to do this, and I definitely don't want to be paid. Now, let's look under the surface and find out what is driving those outcomes at the level of causes. So the research Gallup had said there's 3 kinds of members in every church. This is true in business, by the way, schools, families, you know. In the whole United States, all denominations, well, I showed you these numbers, 29% are engaged, and this is of the people who show up. Here are the Catholic numbers in the United States. In the average Catholic Church in the United States, only 16% are engaged, and 39% are actively disengaged. Now, here's the trick. This middle group is going to take on the color of the group on either side of it that's bigger. So if there's a lot of crabbing and grousing going along, these folks are going to get caught up in it. Here's my diocese that my bishop hired Gallup to do a phone survey of the diocese. Look at this, 41% active disengagement. You add that to the 50%, you've got 91% of the people are either negative or crabby when you walk in the door. Father Chris and I used to stand at the door. We're the only parish in the diocese that does not have a permanent church. We're hopefully going to be building it. We've only been planning it for 16 years. Diocese keeps putting us back. It's a long story. But in any case, so we're standing at the doorway of our very large lobby, and visitors always would say to both of us, Father, excuse me, is this really a Catholic church? And I would always look down at my vestments and say, why on earth would I be dressed this way? And then Chris and I got into the habit of asking people, why are you asking me this question? And they always said the same thing. Oh, well, it's so friendly here.
Oh.
Now, look at this, 41% actively disengaged. No wonder they're saying that. Here's our numbers at St. Gerard. 54% engaged, 33 not engaged, and only 13 crabby applicants. 13%. Gallup calls these people cavemen. C-A-V-E, consistently against virtually everyone. And they take up all your time, don't they? Gallup said to us, give these people all your time. And sooner or later, these folks will come around. Now, see these numbers down here? This is underground. This is a measurement of, there's a pretty good feeling in this one. There's a pretty good feeling in this one. It's about relationships and openness. Bishop Morneau talked about relationships in the start. These numbers cause these numbers. Good soil, good crop. Crappy soil, crappy crop. As we say back in New York, gavisha? You get it? Now, to be able to measure this is unbelievable, because we all know this intuitively, but to be able to measure it is like amazing. So, the Gallup, the polling results and the Pew thing is measuring trailing indicators. A good collection this year means something went well last year. Gallup wanted to give us tools that are leading indicators, how we could measure what's going on in the soil of our parish now, so we know what's going to happen next year. Because good soil produces good crop. So this is about living the parable of the sower. Now, what causes, let me go back to that, what causes someone to become engaged? So Gallup went further and said, okay, let's find out, let's ask people, what are the attitudes and behaviors that lead people to be engaged in their parish? This is the $64,000 question. They found that people coming back to church asked 4 questions. What do I get out of this? Number 1, I gotta be getting something out of this. When they get over that, then they get on to, well, what can I give to this? And then they want to know, well, do I really belong here, or do they really want me? And then they say, okay, how can we grow? Look how many steps there are before I becomes we. And this is based on research. It's not a theory. They didn't say, oh, let's sort of imagine. No. It was based on asking the statistical equivalent of everybody in the United States who goes to church. It's about meeting needs, first step, making a contribution, second step, being part of the community, and you get to mission, finally, at the 4th step. So, these 12 items of engagement I'm going to tell you now are the most have the highest correlation to the 4 outcomes of acts: inviting, giving, thanking, and serving. When people strongly agree with the next 12 statements in order, that's the most likely path to those great results. Number 1, in my parish, I know what's expected of me. You know, when you do your stewardship renewal, and we used to do that, we always do, we take a step chart, we give them a chart that's got, you calculate your income, what you're giving to the parish, and what percent or half% increase looks like. This is a clear expectation we're putting out there. That's why we have a great collection. Our average weekly gift is $38.19, and we don't like have a zillion people coming to this either. One very arrogant Msgr in our diocese who hates stewardship said to me at a meeting with the deans once, "Well, do you know your average weekly gift?" When I said $38.19, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. He won't ask me that question anymore. In my parish, my spiritual needs are met. However, that's defined by people. When Pew asked people why they left, they said because their spiritual needs weren't being met. So that's about meeting needs. Next, about making a contribution. In my parish, I regularly have the opportunity to do what I do best. Stephanie Moore's workshop next, and tomorrow there's one called The Gifted, which is about strengths of discernment. This piece here, Gallup knows that when people know what they do best, this is the super glue of engagement. Number 3 has more power to create engagement than the other 11 put together. So that's why what Stephanie's going to do with you on their phenomenal research around talent is kind of the centerpiece, the jewel in this otherwise in the setting. In the last month, I have received recognition or praise from someone in my parish. Nobody ever left church, Al Winston, the author of the book, says. Nobody ever left the church or a parish because they just praised me too much. It was affirmation all the time. It was embarrassing. I just had to get out of it. The spiritual leaders of my parish seem to care about me as a person. I'm good at remembering names, and that's how I show people I care. Father Chris, my co-pastor of many years, he used to say to me, "Am I Father Chris or am I Father Bill?" I can't remember names too well. He couldn't remember anybody's name. But because he had input as one of his themes of talent, he was a great caretaker, and he would listen to and absorb everything you wanted to tell him for as long as you needed to. So when people wanted caretaking, they didn't come to me, they went to him, even though I remembered everybody's name. I was known as the hatchet man. So everybody has their unique way of showing leadership. And this is the leaders' care, not just the priests, the leaders of the parish care. There is someone in my parish who encourages my spiritual growth. This is about encouraging you to find out what you're the Paul Potts of in your parish, in your life. And that can happen informally or formally. Now, creating community. As a member of my parish, as a member of my congregation, my opinions seem to count. This does not mean we vote on everything. I'm a pastor who had to go from 7 masses to 5. So huge parish, 6,000 families. He asked people, send in a plan for new Msgr. They got gazillions of them. The pastoral leaders sorted them out to 3 or 4 plans that would work and fit into the parish mission. They put that out for the vote. They couldn't lose because every one of the 4 were acceptable. And it built engagement like so deeply. Parish of 7,000 families, not one complaint was registered about the movement. People said, I don't like this, but I'm willing to live with it. And why did they have that? Because they asked people's opinion in a responsible way. They weren't, letting the inmates run the prison. But they did. The mission or purpose of my congregation makes me feel like my participation is important. When you celebrate somebody in the parish who's done mission work or who's going somewhere to South America or going down, help the folks in New Orleans or whatever those things that you do, you're building engagement by helping everybody else who's not going know that they're part of an organization that supports this kind of thing. The other members of my parish are committed to spiritual growth. During Lent, many years ago, we decided not to have homilies, but to have guided meditations in the style of St. Ignatius. So we have composition of place. We ask everybody to go into the desert with all the word. And the application of the 5 senses: what do you see in the desert? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? All that stuff that St. Ignatius talks about. I have never heard such silence in my entire life, and this is like 12 years we've been doing this. Here's silence communicating to people that the other members of my parish are committed to spiritual growth. Aside from family members, I have the best friend in my parish. Nationally, this question gets the lowest score.
but it's critical, because the way we say this in plain English is, from Sunday to Sunday, I miss my church friends. Well, if you're missing somebody, it could be a best friend there. Now, being on mission. In the last 6 months, someone in my parish has spoken to me about the progress of my spiritual life. That's where, either in groups or individually or wherever, you just do it in the parish, somebody is coming up to you and saying, hey, how are you, since you're the Paul Potts of soup kitchens, how's it going? Do you need some help, some development? Is there a course you'd like to take? Is there somebody you want to bring in? Or, you know what I'm trying to say? That's an engagement builder. And finally, at the top of the pyramid, in my parish, I have opportunities to learn and grow. Now, here's what happens. Lots of parishes have lots of these marvelous, very interesting learning and growing programs, and nobody comes to them. You know why? Because the pyramid is inverted. That should be at the top, not at the bottom. That's not the first thing to do, it's the last thing to do. So that belonging can lead to believing. Makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. This is what the scorecard looks like after you've taken the engagement survey in your parish. We do it twice, all month long. The computers are open to us. We do it in the pews on 2 weekends. People fill it out. We have volunteers who enter it into the computer, and you get a score for each of the items of engagement, and then you get the 75th percentile. So you know what the top 25% of the country's churches are responding to as a comparison. And you get a score also on each of the 4 elements of that pyramid I was talking about. And this is basically what that prize is. People give a response to the 9 items of spiritual commitment, 12 items of engagement, the 4 outcomes. You get this scorecard to share with everybody in the parish, and an analysis of what the scores mean, and you get data for planning. So that next year, you say, all right, we're going to focus on these areas to make them stronger. And when you take the survey up to next year, you get a measure from your people. And you know, we're giving back to God with increase because we're measuring. So spiritual commitment leads to these 4 outcomes, but it is engagement that drives spiritual commitment. Now, to conclude, I want you to meet Frank and kind of his guardian. Frank's a parishioner, at weekly mass all the time, and he has a company called Clever Closets. He renovates closets, puts shelves and stuff. He's on a job in Douglas and Queens, 2 counties away from us. And while he's measuring, the lady of the house says, Frank, may I ask you a personal question? Sure, he says. Are you a man of God? Frank's telling me the story. Frank's right out of The Sopranos. So Frank says, well, you know, I got my ruler, I'm measuring the closets, and she's asking me, am I a man of God? What am I going to say to a thing like that? So, and of course he is. Real humble guy. So he says, so I said, yeah, well, I like to think I am. I had a feeling about you, she says. Would you say a prayer over my son, Wesley? He's 5, he's autistic, he has never spoken his entire life. So Frank says, so Father, what am I going to say to this lady? Of course I'm going to say a prayer. I don't know what kind of prayer I'm going to say. So he's saying the prayer, and he tells me the story later. He says, and Father, the strangest thing happened. I'm saying this prayer over the kid, you know, his mother's there, his brother's there, and I'm there, and we're in his bedroom, and I'm saying this prayer. And I felt like I was at Mass at St. George's on Sunday. I felt like all the other parishioners were standing around me in the bedroom. It was weird. I'd never had any experience like that before. By the way, when I told the story later on Easter, a lady in the parish said, well, you know what? It reminds me of the Verizon commercial. What a great definition of the church. Where any one of us goes, everybody is there. So it's not the network, it's the church. Now this is kind of scary. Frank was scared out of his life. Because the following week, he lights his candle, he gets back to the office, Wesley's mother's on the phone. Frank, did you light that candle? He says, yeah, I just got back from church. She says, I know. Wesley just said his first word today. Mom. Following Mother's Day, we invite Frank up into the pulpit as part of the homily to tell the story personally. He turns his cell phone off, of course, while he's up there. After Mass, he turns it on. It's Mrs. Wright, who called while he was in the pulpit. Oh, Frank, happy Mother's Day. We're just so grateful to you and St. George for your prayers. Here's Wesley in the background. And you can hear Wesley running around. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. Wesley's up to paragraphs a year later. Now, we never intended stuff like this, and there's like healing things going on in the parish you can't even imagine. Frightens the life out of all of us, frankly. Way beyond anything we put. But this is what engagement or affiliation, whatever you want to call it, means. When we look at each other as those who are part of me, God then can work better through us than he could otherwise, and this is what happens. So, it's not guilt fear, it's not anxiety fear, it's thrill fear. So we have our two great pillars as Catholics, Scripture and Tradition. We have all about to change pretty quickly with Roman Right, New Missal, documents. These three books, research things from Gallup, have been immensely helpful for us to become who we are. The Strengths Finder book, which Stephanie's going to talk about the strengths thing next. Growing an Engaged Church, and all the tools around that. And there's even a program for priests. I've taken the leadership course on how to use all this stuff, how to become a good farmer, so to speak, in the parish. So this kind of graphic summarizes the whole thing, and a couple of us around the country have formed sort of a voluntary group, and we have, believe it or not, Facebook, a private social network, not open to the internet, just to Catholics using Strengths and Engagement, or wanting to use them, at that website. It's free to join. You can meet Catholics. There's 200 members now, Stephanie? 250. And people who create things, ways to do this in the parish, they put it on our network in the library, and you can download stuff and ask questions of people and whatever. So I think I'm a little over, but thank you for your patience, Scott, and for your wonderful participation.
Father Bill, let's see, you would fill out your evaluations and you can put them in the